Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Shalom, Shabbat for those who follow that. Hotep, Assalamu alaikum, all of that good stuff. I ain't mess with y'all about politics in a minute, so I figured kind of go over a few of the things that are happening in the world today to kind of highlight the whole political climate. And one of the things that has really caught my attention is this whole this collusion thing. We're still hearing about collusion with Trump and how they're close to impeaching him and all of that. And it's funny to see how the people that follow the Democrats, as well as the Democrats themselves, are steady going in about collusion. But when you look at historically the United States foreign policy, it has always been about disrupting other folks' nations and the way that they govern their countries. For example, they have a department dedicated strictly to the disruption of other people's governance under this particular government department or organization called USAID. You can look it up. And their whole aim, they're actually funded by the government, and their aim is to go around and spread democracy into other countries and freedom and fighting and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these countries are not about democracy, which a lot of people know that democracy is totally equated to capitalism. And capitalism is of course, anti-poor people. So when they press this particular agency to go into different countries and to look for leaders that are going to be pro-American friendly, or they're going to be friendly toward American interests, that means then that country's natural resources will be robbed, and those leaders will be puppets of the United States government and corporate interests. One such example would be in Cuba, with Castro and the way that he governed, being a so-called communist nation, and how the United States government sent U.S. aid into Cuba, and they designated a certain amount of money for that to try to disrupt the Cuban nation and Cubans' way of governance, to try to force it into a democracy, so then that American corporate interests can go into Cuba and then rob the Cubans of its fruit and its natural resources in the way of agriculture. Now, Cuba, of course, under Castro, we know was helping South Africa fight against apartheid. They send doctors all over the world, especially in African and poor nations, to provide free health care to the poor citizens. Matter of fact, any so-called black person in America can go to Cuba right now and get a free doctor or medical education to become a doctor, as long as they provide a certain amount of pro bono work after they've gotten that medical license. Yet the United States government doesn't provide free medical care as well as free medical training to its citizens, yet they want to disrupt Cuba via U.S. aid. So then how do we look as a nation talking about Putin trying to disrupt the American elections via Trump, yet we're all in everybody else's country doing the same thing? Another example, go to Venezuela, and their president there, Nicolas Maduro, who was a student of our brother Hugo Chavez. Chavez was a student of the Bolivian Revolution, just associated with, of course, Cesar Chavez and Castro, and he was biracial as well. He was half black. But Maduro is trying to institute some of the same policies that Chavez had, and American government is now saying that they do not recognize his government, and they are supporting a pro-capitalist, pro-American type leader to take over in Venezuela. Now, if that's not meddling in those folks' elections, then I don't know what the hell is. So how do y'all sit back and talk about Trump and Putin when your government is doing the exact same thing? Y'all look really dumb doing that. And I hate to call y'all dumb, but you look dumb. If you don't study American foreign policy and the way that they play these types of games with other countries, yet the American media never purport or reports those particular types of policies. But, you know, if you go anywhere outside of America and talk to real students of American foreign policy, then you will see the bullshit. And you will be like, yeah, we look really dumb talking about Trump and Putin when we're in everybody's country trying to have them govern via a democracy. What do you think the whole thing of was in Libya? The same thing in Iraq. What they're trying to do in Syria is they trying to put in pro-Western, pro-corporate greed type leaders who will rob the countries of their natural resources so then American corporations can rape them and make a profit for the elite. It has nothing to do with bringing democracy per se, as far as the freedom to speak about a president or to speak about the policies of a nation. It's more so democracy equates to capitalism. And capitalism equates to robbing poor people of what little dignity and resources that they have. Now, going back to Syria, do y'all not find it interesting that the whole time the American government was in Syria, there was no suicide bombings? And then all of a sudden, when Trump decides that he's going to pull the troops out of Syria and move them to Iraq, they have a suicide bombing? I mean, it wasn't the whole point of those people fighting to liberate their countries from American imperialism and American people was to get them out of their country, yet the president of the United States is saying that he's going to move his people out of the country, and then they get a suicide bombing to kill American troops? Y'all don't find that really, really coincidental? Come on, y'all. I know y'all smarter than that. Stop. You know what I mean? Stop believing that BS. It's not even, it's so insulting to our particular mentality for them to say that all of a sudden on the weeks before he's going to withdraw the troops, y'all decide that y'all want to kill somebody now. And of course, we know what ISIS really stands for. You know what I mean? Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. However, we know that the American Jewish or the Israeli and the Saudi Arabians want to overtake Syria because they see that Syria being a Shiite nation, Iran being a Shiite nation, and Iraq being very friendly toward the Iranian government, they are totally taking over the so-called Middle East. But you got to ask yourself, when have you ever seen an Iranian or a Shiite suicide bomber? Most of these so-called suicide bombers are of the Shiite version of Islam. They're not, of the Sunni version of Islam, not the Shiite version of Islam. So then ask yourself, why then would the Shiite version of Islam be such a threat to American interests? It wouldn't be. Only insofar as they will not allow the country to rape them the way those Jews who call themselves Arabs in Saudi Arabia are allowing Saudi Arabia to be so-called raped. But please don't believe the hype. Now, I'm not saying that those 4 people didn't die, and for whoever they believe in as a god, made that particular entity, comfort their relatives. However, you have to look at it. This makes no sense for them to kill those people, knowing that the president has said that he's going to take the troops out of Syria and shift them toward Iraq. So then now there will be no more troops in Syria, which is what they allegedly wanted anyway. And so for them to actually go and kill those people in the last hour was crazy. It made absolutely no sense at all. So then that tells you that that was a, what's the word I'm looking, a false flag per se. It was used because the American people were being manipulated under people like this war hawk, what's his name, Lindsey Graham out of South Carolina. And other people were saying, oh no, we shouldn't pull the troops out of Syria. Well, why not? We were never invited into Syria by the Syrian government. That's one. Number two is, in order for America to be at war, they should follow the Constitution, which says that it has to be voted on by Congress. That never happened. So then we were a legal occupying force in the Syrian government. And there was no reason for us to be there in the first place. Russia was already handling that. But the fact is that the Russians were getting rid of the same people that the Americans, the Israelis, the Saudis were pushing into Syria to do a regime change via AKA USAID. Again, to bring a so-called democracy into Syria. So you have to look at these things and ask yourself, what was the point in the first place? And we know the point was, again, American corporate interests. And those corporate interests was in the form of bringing natural gas from the so-called Middle East into Europe. And why Europe? Because Europe has no natural gas. They have to get it all from Russia. And Russia's part of Eurasia, or the Asian continent. So then the Russians, who have this huge gas conglomerate called Gazprom, they furnish the majority of natural gas to the rest of the European nations. American corporations don't like that because they can't get in on the funds. So then what they try to do is disrupt the Russian monopoly on providing natural gas to heat up the so-called Europeans. And there was going to be a gas pipeline that was running through Syria into Turkey and on out into, because Turkey is just right across the water from Europe. And it was going to run all the way through there, through Syria. Well, when they came to the Syrian president, and he like, no, y'all not doing that because y'all are not going to give me enough loot for that, not enough money, then that's when they start trying to do a regime change on it. The same thing, as you know, that happened in Afghanistan. You know, they were going to run the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Indian pipeline called the TAPI pipeline through Afghanistan, so then they could ship natural gas through Afghanistan, through Kandahar, so then they could get this particular money. So it's all about, again, corporate interests. It has nothing to do with liberating the so-called people from the Taliban. As a matter of fact, Trump and certain parts of his administration had been having secret negotiations with the Taliban so they could have a withdrawal. And if you notice, he did say what? That he was going to pull some of the troops out of Afghanistan. So then you have to always, again, look at, follow the dollar. We've been told many times to follow the dollar. And you have to look at it the same way. Follow the money. And the money is always in the natural resources. So then those are just a couple of the things that are happening in the world today from a political standpoint, especially as far as American foreign policy is concerned, that the prostitutes in the media are giving us, and we're supposed to follow it hook, line, and sinker and say, oh no, this is what we should be doing, and we should be not leaving Syria. Why not? What are we there for? We should be living. We should even be in Syria. And for those of us who have families in the military that are getting blown to bits in these wars, we should want them brought home. But they got y'all thinking, oh no, we need to stay there. And let's get on into this whole other humanitarian thing that's kind of pissing me off with this so-called government shutdown, a partial government shutdown, where everybody wants to now feed the so-called starving government workers. Really? Let me let y'all in on a little something. Government workers make a shitload of money. Yes, they do. They make more than the average so-called American worker. Yes, they do. Go to any federal building and watch the type of cars that them Negroes be driving and how they dress and the houses they live in. And not only that, because a lot of them have direct deposit of their funds, what the banks and certain credit unions are doing, being that they know they're under a shutdown, they're advancing them a paycheck. And they're giving them up to about 3 to 6 months to pay it off. So them niggas ain't hurting. Don't get me wrong. They are not hurting. Not like the rank and file, everyday black, brown, and even some European poor people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, yet they can't go anywhere and get free meals. They can't go anywhere and get concessions that, they can't pay their cell phone bill, or the mortgage company is going to give them some type of concessions because they're government workers. Here we go, and they are prepared for shutdowns. Exactly. They know every October 1st there's a possibility that the government will be shut down because it hadn't been fully funded. They know this. This has happened every year since they started shutting the government down in 1976. So then this is not new to government people. They know this. So then you have to ask yourself, again, look how the prostitutes play us in the media. They're putting up all of this sympathy for government workers, but yet the average person that's living with government assistance are hurting like hell and been hurting. Like I said, I live in Atlanta, and you go downtown anywhere near 5 Points and you see all kinds of homeless, hungry, unkempt, mentally impaired folk walking around in freezing ass weather. And the police in downtown Atlanta will harass the hell out of them. There's no sympathy there. And these are the people that really, really need the assistance. Yet, your government or the people that are trying to make Trump look bad, and don't think this is a pro-Trump video. This is a hypocrisy of America and American people video. But the hypocrisy of these people to want to give all of these government workers free food. I saw somewhere I'm assuming it's Miami, because there was a Haitian restaurant that is giving government workers that are out of work free food. But yet, again, a lot of these black folk that are walking around in various metropolitan black areas are being shooed away, arrested, criticized, ran from, and mistreated because they are actually indigent. They had no funds. So then, how do y'all justify giving to these people who make $50,000 to over $100,000 a year, and you give them a free food, but the person that actually has no job, and you can look at them and tell that they have no job and they have no sources of shelter and food, you don't give them jack shit. And I'm supposed to look at you and be impressed that you are now giving to government workers. Really? And let's take it even a step further. Where was the free shit when black folk was working for free? Where was the sympathy for from 1609 to 1865? Where was the sympathy? There was none. So all of you Negroes that are out there feeling sorry for government workers because they are out of a job, which they're going to eventually come back, and they've already passed a bill to retroactively pay them. So they're going to get their money. And believe me, this shutdown will be over in a week or less. Because Trump is about to make an announcement later on today, because he's been hitting at 30, and tomorrow will be the 30th day that this thing has been going on. So believe me, it ain't going to last too much longer, but they're going to get all of their money back. So they basically had a free vacation at the American taxpayers' expense that they're going to get their money back. But the same people who Or on the flip side of that, those people that are out in the streets begging for food, begging for shelter and money, we step over them and we call them bums. So then y'all got to stop that, man. Stop being what's the word I'm looking for? Influenced. That's the word I'm looking for. Stop being influenced by the media, which is obviously anti-Trump, because that's why he calls them fake news. So then anything he does, they're going to try to make it look bad for him. But get even over that and just look at from a humanitarian level. Where was all of this sympathy for all of these people that are always out in the streets begging? Where is the outpouring of support? Where is it? And it don't exist. So then the media is going to do everything they can to make it look like, oh, Americans are so giving and heartwarming and they just love their government workers. Bullshit. Bullshit. They do not. This is only a ploy to make the president look bad. But again, when you look at it from a holistic point of view, it go to any metropolitan city, you're going to see homeless folk walking around that ain't got nothing to eat. And we're now in the dead of winter, and they're going to be cold as hell. And some people have even frozen to death this year because they had no shelter. But there's no funds for that. When you look at the Democrats and what do they want to do? They want to bring in a whole bunch of so-called immigrants, and those immigrants get what? Assistance. They get government assistance. And so that's at your taxpayer expense. Now, what about the people that have lived in this country all of this time, that have paid taxes, that have fallen on hard times, and you can't get jack shit. They can't go to the government and get jack shit. And you want me to feel bad about the fact that people are leaving their own country to come here and then they get stopped? What about all of the black folk in the neighborhoods? I pay taxes. My relatives pay taxes. And I'm sure all of your relatives pay taxes. And we've been paying taxes. As a matter of fact, Social Security, in order to collect Social Security, you got to be at least 62. Then, if this is for people not getting disability, but just actual Social Security retirement benefits. Then when you get to, they changed it to 67. Now go and look at your family tree and see how many black people live past 67. So then we're paying into a system that doesn't give us, that we won't be able to collect benefits on for little or no time. And yet, all of this money that we've given is now going to go to somebody else, but our family members who are actually needing the support can't get jack shit. And I'm supposed to feel sympathy for people that are leaving their own country to come here. No, I'm not. I'm sorry. I don't. Get mad at me. I don't care. Take care of my people first. Because our people took care of you. We done fought in every war you done asked us to fight in. We done donated to every cause you done asked us to donate to. But now that a few government workers are out of work, and a lot of them are black folk, but the reality is there's way more poor people that exist in America that are black that need assistance from everyday Americans, and nobody's giving them shit. So, anyway, that's my rant for today. I thank y'all for listening. And again, watch the media and how they're trying to influence your thinking. And again, take the time to go and research USAID. It's an organization that's funded by the government, and that they're funded to go and perpetuate democracy into other lands. And the democracy, again, comes in the form of making those countries susceptible to foreign or American corporate interests. so that those countries can be robbed. So anytime a nation decides to nationalize their resources, when I mean nationalize their resources, what that means is they will take the resources and they will take the money, the proceeds from that resource, and distribute it back to the government for distribution to the citizens. This is what Gaddafi was doing in Libya. He would take the oil proceeds, put it back in the government. The government would give free health care, free education. They would give stipends to people who just got married, etc. So when they nationalize the resources, it's not in the hands of a private entity, it's in the hands of the people. So when a country nationalizes their resources, they become public enemy number one to American corporate greed. If you go back and study Iran back in the early 1950s, this is what they did. They nationalized their oil, and so that then kicked the British and American policy or companies out of there, and then that's when Iran became the big evil Satan. You follow what I'm saying? This is how it goes. So any country that decides to nationalize their resources, that keeps the proceeds back funneling, it's like what we call circulating the dollar in the black community so many times. So everybody gets to benefit from it. So when you nationalize your natural resources, then that does the same thing for that particular country. It allows everybody to benefit. So then understand when leaders that are not after American corporate greed and American corporate dollars decide to do these things, they become the boogeyman to American corporate interests, and then they use that in the media to justify going into those countries and killing those leaders. This is what was happening with Lumumba in the Congo. He was going to do the same thing. You know what I mean? So then understand this is how they do things. I think Lumumba's either assassination or birthday was like a couple of days ago. So shout out to Lumumba. Your spirit lives on, good brother. So yeah, peep that, y'all, and understand how American media works in concert with the American government, which works in concert with American corporate interests and those corporate greed, and how they use the media to justify going into a nation and enslaving its citizens and stealing its resources. Don't believe the hype. Do your own research. If you need me to help you do your research, I could definitely point you to some areas that you need to look at. All right? Y'all stay up. Peace.